All right, so everybody tries to say that the R8 is a replacement of the R. I don't know if it's a replacement of the R. I mean, I don't know, maybe Canon said that or something, but I feel like the R8 it tackles a lot of things, a lot of problems or issues that we had with the R, but I don't know if it's a replacement unless that's specifically what Canon said. It does fix with it doesn't have the 4K crop. It's better low light, the low light autofocus. One of the things that so the RP, for example, for a while, you know, you had the R and the RP, and the RP was only 26 megapixel, which was still more than the R8 and more than the R6 Mark II and more than the R6. It's even more than the R3. Megapixels doesn't matter to everybody. But so the only camera that has a higher megapixel, full frame, that has a higher megapixel than the R is the R5, the R5C, and that's it, I believe. So now that's just megapixel. So it depends on what you're looking for. Now what I didn't like, it's a lot of things I didn't like about the RP, which is why I went with the R. The RP is still available for purchase. The R has been discontinued. I believe when the R first hit the market, it was $22.99. Okay, and then it almost instantly dropped down to $17.99. And then so I got mine for $17.99. But even during that time, you would see like Black Friday sales where the camera was, how much was the camera? Maybe it was $13.99, which is what the price of it is now. Or no, it might have been, was it 15, 11? It might have been $13.99. So, which is what the price of it is now. But so what I'm saying is, looking at megapixel, there's no other camera. I don't want a camera with 20 megapixel, 24 megapixel, even 26 megapixel. So 30 megapixel, that was about somewhere in the 30s was about as low as I would go. So I don't necessarily see the R8 as a replacement, like I say, unless that's specifically what Canon has said. But it does solve a lot of the issues that the R did have. There was a lot of things that I did not like about the R, that the R8 now has those features. So I mean, I could not, like people saying that the R8 is a replacement of the R. If that was the case, I could go buy a R8 right now and never use this again, never use my R ever again. But I don't see it like that. If I bought an R8, I would still use my R. That's why I'm saying it's not a replacement, in my opinion. Even with the shutter going to 1/8000, I still feel like that's not enough. Because if it's a super bright sunny day, I can crank my shutter all the way to 1/8000 and it's still too bright. Now of course that's shooting at 1.2 on my 50 millimeter, and that's with my ISO probably about 800, so still pretty bright. I think even if I was at ISO 400, it was still pretty bright. But of course, that's shooting at a 1.2 aperture. But yeah, so when I bought my R, the thing that I did not know is that it had a 4K crop. So immediately, I had bought a 15 to 35 millimeter L series, That was the first L series that I purchased. I did not want to purchase that lens, that millimeter. It's a 2.8. But the reason that I purchased that one, it was about $2,200, I think, at the time. And the reason that I purchased it was because of the 4K crop. That was almost the only reason that I purchased that lens. I really had no reason to shoot down to 15 millimeter, like, you know. Now the 35 on it I would use, but my point is, I would have went with something more like my dream lens, which is the 28 to 70 millimeter, even though it doesn't have image stabilization. I hate that, but the imaging that you get on the 28 to 70 versus any other lens out there, because even the 24 to 70, which is kind of a comparable lens of that, it has image stabilization, but you're just not getting that image that and it's a 2.8, and the other one is a 2.0. So like I've heard people say, you're basically getting a zoom lens that gives you the aperture of a prime lens. You know what I'm saying? The aperture and the imaging of a prime lens, actually, I would say better imaging than some prime lenses. Like, for example, the 50 millimeter 1.2, which is what I have here. This is one of a very good lens from Canon, and the 28 to 70 is probably better than this. They're still very close, but the imaging you're gonna get out of that 28 to 70, and this one doesn't have image stabilization as well. I do have a 50 millimeter 1.8, which is not an L series. I like that lens, but I liked it so much I went and bought the 50 millimeter L series. There was I was shooting a birthday party at Main Event. It's like a bowling alley, and they had a lot of LED lights and stuff in, and so it's my first time using my 50 millimeter 1.8. It was like $200-300 lens, and so when I cut it on, just immediately the way that the background bokeh was, I was like, wow, like, this is the imaging that I'm getting out of a $200-300 lens. So that is a lens that I would definitely recommend to you know, a beginner. 50 millimeter is like the millimeter that you would see them use in like a lot of Hollywood films and stuff like that, even though they use other millimeters, but the most millimeter you're probably going to see is a 50 or a 40. And so like I say, they use other ones, but so the RP, the first camera, I've got every APS-C camera that Canon offers, pretty much from the bottom to the top. I started at the little $300 range, and then I just worked my way up. And the image that I had in my head that I thought that I could get out of a camera, I just wasn't seeing it. I'm not saying that any of those cameras were bad, but what I'm saying is the imaging that I visualize in my own head. It depends on what you're trying to do with that camera. And me, I was about, because I'm a music artist, my goal was to shoot professional, high quality, Hollywood grade videos, you know, without breaking the bank, which a lot of people don't understand that's very difficult, right? So some people think you can spend $300 on a camera and get this Hollywood grade image, and that's just not gonna happen. You can get a good image, but you're not gonna get a Hollywood grade image. So people will spend, you know, $1,200, $1,500 on a phone, but you won't invest that same money into a camera. So the RP is the first camera, the first full frame camera that I was looking at, because remember, I was still trying to be on a budget. The RP was the cheapest full frame that Canon had at that time for the mirrorless, and I was still debating if I wanted to go mirrorless or was I gonna stay in DSLR. But because this mirrorless was supposed to be a better quality, that rang a bell in my head. And so I was looking at the RP. I wasn't really concerned too much about the megapixel at that time. I was more of just what is the end result of the quality. And I did some reviews. I never got to use that camera, but I did some research and saw reviews where people were saying that the autofocus was not as good as the R. So that alone made me not even, it was some other things as well, but they were saying like, yeah, if you're doing like photography or something like that, manual mode, then it's fine. But for somebody that's trying to YouTube and you need the camera to autofocus without somebody having to be behind the camera, they were saying that the R would be the option for that. They were saying the RP, it had the autofocus, but it was different than the R. So I typically use my R for videos, for YouTube videos, as well as shooting music videos. So that was kind of a deal breaker with me. I didn't even really dig much into the RP anymore after that. So I ended up buying the R, right? And so now that I bought the R, I've had it for a while, but I haven't used it that much. So I didn't know that it had a 4K crop. Once I found out it had a 4K crop, I really wanted to take it back, but I had already went over the time frame for it. And I really couldn't have. Canon at the time didn't really have anything else out that was comparable or better than the R. So, and I don't remember if the R5 was out I think the R5 was out at the time, but I couldn't afford it. And so, but that was the one that I wanted. I looked at the R6, but I was looking at the megapixel. I was like, that's a big jump down in megapixel that I'm doing to get the R6. Now, something that blew my mind was I seen a comparison video between the R6 and the R5. And while you would think that the R5 would blow the R6 out of the park, it did not. I'm not saying that the R5 is not a more detailed camera, because it is. But when it came to color accuracy, when it came to low light performance, when it came to the R6 was just, it was clean. It was a cleaner image. Now it was darker, and even if you tried to compensate or brighten it, the R5 handled, the R5 gave better detail, and better lighting. So I guess that 45 megapixel is that's where that's coming from. Even though so there's like, what I'm saying is, when I say, so the R5 was like in dark areas, the R5 was a brighter image. You could see more light in that image. But the R6, even though it was a darker image, it was cleaner. And so I don't know if that just, I seen them do different settings with it, so they were trying to get them as close as possible, and it still seemed like, it just blew me away, what I seen on the R6, and that wasn't even the R6 Mark II. So One thing I like about the R5 and the R6 is the IBIS, the in-body image stabilization. Now, I've thought about going with the R5C. That has been another camera that has been on my radar, the R5C. And I also was looking at the R3. With the megapixel on the R3 is 24 megapixel. It shoots 6K. I don't know what I'm saying is with a camera with, when you look at a camera that costs this much money, $5,000, $6,000, even $4,000, $3,000, like, you expect some of the things, you know, you expect more from these cameras. And so, like with my R, for example, this camera has been discontinued. You can no longer buy this camera from Canon. There's still a few other merchants out there that still have this camera in stock, but you can't. Canon had it online for a little while at $13.99, but I guess they sold out of what they had, so they're not even offering anymore. But the crazy thing is they still offer the RP. I don't understand that, because why would they still offer the RP but not the R? Because the R was definitely one of those cameras that will always go up in history, especially over the RP. If anything, I would have got rid of the RP and stayed with the R, but I see no reason to get rid of the R. Like, you got a lot of good cameras out right now. I think I don't know, I can't say what Canon is doing, but with this first batch, these Mark 1s, this first batch of mirrorless cameras, and other people have said this too. They say that Canon does this. Canon will release a camera, but it's like they kind of just give you enough to get you to buy the camera and still leave room for improvements, so they can release a Mark II and a Mark III and a Mark IV. So that's like, for example, I would get the R5C, no questions asked, because the R5C is Netflix approved. That is the imaging that I'm looking for. And I've never seen the R5C, but what I'm saying is it's a cinema camera, and I've seen the C70. Okay, that's another camera I've been looking at. Problem with the C70 is my teacher has that camera, and he also has the R5. And he said that he uses his R5 almost every day. And he took the C70 out, doing what he always does with the R5, and it got a little bit of humidity or moisture or whatever it is, and it had to be sent off to the shop. It cannot handle humidity or weather or temperature like the R5 can. And so that was a turnoff for me, because now I'm like, okay, if I were to buy the C70, I would still have to buy another everyday camera. You see what I'm saying? So that was a turnoff for me. Now I don't even really want the C70, because I know that if I buy the C70, I'm going to have to still buy another professional top of the line camera like the R5. But like I say, the R5 was the camera that I was stuck on for a long time, because for one, it was the only camera out there with a higher or equivalent megapixel to the R. That's why I'm saying I don't understand why Canon hasn't released any cameras in the 30 megapixel range, 30 to 36 megapixel range, 38 megapixel, 40 megapixel. There's nothing in between the 30 and 39 megapixel range. I don't even know if 39 that they can do that number, but I assume. But anyways, what I'm saying is if they can do 21 megapixel, I mean, so that just, I don't know. There's no IBIS in the R5C. Like, that is, so now if I'm not gonna buy the C70, because for one, it's not a full frame camera. It's a Super 35. which the imaging on it is superb. I love the imaging on it, but you know, just being able to have that full frame. The R3 was, it's so many things. It's like they give you bits and pieces in each camera, and for the prices of these cameras, it's too much. The way that Canon has done these cameras, they release us these cameras almost like a demo. Like, hey, we got but they know that everybody's gonna buy these cameras because it's all that Canon has, and it's their first mirrorless release. So all these Mark 1s that have come out, the R3, the R5C, the R5, the R, the RP, the R6, the R8. These are Mark 1s, right? These are not Mark 2 versions. I'm not saying that they'll ever come out with a Mark 2 of certain versions, like the RP or the R or the R8, or even the R5C or R3, but they could. And if you have a good camera and it's almost like an unfinished product, why would you not release a Mark II? It's the perfect opportunity to release a Mark II, a Mark III, a Mark IV, a Mark V. So when Canon released the R6 Mark II, I no longer wanted the R5. Why? Because everything that has been offered, the technology in the R8 and the R6 Mark II, which the R8 and the R6 Mark II have the same sensor in them, and they have so many similarities in them. It's not even funny. The only thing one of the only things you're not getting in the R8 is probably IBIS and a few other things. But basically you're getting the quality, the image quality of the R6 Mark II, not the R6, not the R, not the RP, but you're getting the image quality of the R6 Mark II. And it probably doesn't have the same processor in it. I don't know. But it does have the same sensor, so the processor can make a big difference as well. Now hold on, they do both have the same processor, maybe. I don't know about the same buffer, but they both have digit X in them. So the RP, I don't know about the R6, but I know the R and the RP, they run off of digit 8. It is digit 8, I believe. And one thing that I do not like, it's a few things that I don't like about my camera. So I like this camera, but in using it, I know that I'll still need to buy a better camera than this. This is a very good camera, but especially for its time when it did come out. But this is a camera that I will maybe pass down to my kids. Then again, I don't know. I'm kind of scared to pass down to my kids because I know the value of this camera. This is a professional camera, okay? But like, there's just some things that I don't like about it. Canon kind of crippled this camera, in my opinion, and as kind of what they do with some of these other ones, like the R3, for example. I was looking at the R3. I was like, wow, like the R3 has a lot of things that I wanted in a camera. It has a backlight sensor. It has a double stack sensor. That helps with, I don't know if you know, whenever you roll a camera, it helps with the image not being bent. Not image roll, but sometimes the image look warped. And the R3 minimizes that with those two sensors. It also has backlit sensor, which helps the ISO, right? So it's better, much better than any other Canon camera in low light, right? Just like the Sonys. So the R3 was a camera that I was looking at. The R3, the R5 were two cameras I was looking at. Then I'm looking at the megapixel on the R3, and I'm like, why would y'all cripple the megapixel? If you already have a backlit sensor, and you have a and then they didn't give it IBIS, and you have a backlit sensor, you have the double sensor, double stack sensor. You don't really need to cripple it down to 24 megapixel. I mean, it probably will give a cleaner image at 24 versus 45 megapixel, but it just leaves me to question. When you look at all their cameras, it leads me to question, this can't be their best. This is like the teaser, but they know a lot of people are not going to catch that. You see what I'm saying? And when I think about buying a camera, I don't just say, oh wow, it shoots at 4K, 8K, yeah, I'm gonna go buy it. No. I might put the camera on my possible list, but I'm still going to compare that camera to other cameras close to it. So the R5C, once I found out the R5 and the R5C, the R5 doesn't have a lot of tools inside of it that the R5 has. I mean, that the R5C has. And so I was like, man, so now I want the R5C, especially after seeing the C70 imaging. Oh my goodness, the C70 imaging just will blow you out of the park. And I was like, wow, I wonder if the R5C will give me the imaging of the C70 and of the C70, but be weather resistant as the R5. Now, I know the R5C has the fan on it, but that still doesn't mean that it can't be as weather resistant as the R5. It does mean that in a way, but what I'm saying is the way that they build the fan. So when you have the fan blowing on one side, where the air comes through, then the other side of it, they can have that fan where it's blowing on the processor, and even if that were to get wet, it would not go into the motherboard. But I don't know if that's how they designed it. So until I see further videos, there's still a question mark with me. And like I say, I really want the R5C right now, but it has no IBIS. And I'm also wondering about that, how weather resistant is it the weather resistance of the C70, or does it have the weather resistance of the R5, or is it just in its own little category? So is it better than the C70 but not as good as the R5 as far as weather resistance? And you can't just go by the numbers on because even like you can look at ISO, for example, on like compare the R5 and the R6, or you can, the ISOs are, just because a camera can go to a certain ISO doesn't mean that it can handle all those ISOs at a clean, usable setting, so just because it can go to a super high ISO does not mean that you're gonna be able to use them. So it might look, some people get stuck on the numbers on paper, and that's not what it's about in all cases. Like I say, with my R, the autofocus and low light, like for example, when I'm YouTubing myself and I'm filming myself, and if I have to have the light like super bright in order to be able to turn my ISO down to like 100, or even I think it can go down to 50 if you expand it. I'm not sure, I can't remember, but I know let's just say at ISO 100, it might not be able to go, to 50, I can't remember. But even with my ISO at 100, or sometimes even 400 or 800, like if I'm using my 15 to 35, which is a 2.8, I'm still not able to get that light, no matter where I put my and if I don't want to put my shutter down too far where it's not, you know, giving me that look and feel that I'm looking for. So I wish Canon would come out with a 35mm L series. I wish they would come out with a 24mm L series, or even something that can go down to 28 and about from about, well, actually I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't say that because they already have the 28 to 70, and that's really the perfect lens for me. Only problem with that lens, it doesn't have IBIS. I mean, not IBIS. It doesn't have image stabilization, but they have the 24 to 70 with image stabilization. But the thing I don't like about that is that's a 2.8 versus a 2. Now, some people say, oh, the 8 doesn't matter. It does for me. I mean, wait, is it 2.8? Yeah, 2.8. It's not that big of a deal breaker, but the imaging that you get off of the 28 to 70 versus the imaging that you get off of the 24 to 70 2.8 is a crazy difference. It's a crazy difference. And so I wish Canon would really come out. I'm ready to see these Mark IIs, okay? And now I know Canon is eventually going to drop Mark IIIs of some of their cameras. I can't wait that long. But there's no point in me buying an R5 when an R5 Mark II might come out soon. There's no reason for me to buy an R6 when the R6 Mark II is out. There's no reason for me to buy a R5C if a R5C Mark II comes out with IBIS. You see what I'm saying? It's leaving a question mark over my head. There's no reason for me to buy an R3. It's not Netflix approved, and it doesn't have IBIS. What if they come out with a Mark II with IBIS and now it's 30 megapixel versus 24? What if they come out with an R5 Mark C with IBIS in it? You know, like it you know. So now, for anybody out there that is on a budget, but you want a full frame, comparable, as close as you can get to Hollywood grade quality, the R8 is a winner right now. The R8 is a winner. The R8 has everything that the R was missing, except for the megapixel. But if you're on a budget and you're stuck on, I'm on a budget, you're not worried about 6 megapixels difference. You're not worried about 24 megapixel versus 30 megapixel. To me, 30 megapixel was too low, but with the money that I had, it was either get the RP 26 megapixel or the R. So what trips me out is you had the RP that was 26 megapixel, but nothing else that Canon offers. Even their R3, which is a $5,000, $6,000 camera, whatever it is, nothing else out there. Even the R6, nothing else out there has 26 megapixel. So it makes it seem like they're leaving room for improvement. It's like they're, I don't know, I'm not speaking down on Canon or anything like that, but I'm just saying, like, you know, if they come out with an R3 Mark II, they have to have a reason to come out with an R3 Mark II. You see what I'm saying? They know people are gonna be happy with, everybody's stuck on these cameras or mirrorless, right? Now the big thing, a lot of people complained about the 4K crops on a lot of their cameras, but a lot of people, a lot of rookies and beginners knew nothing about the 4K crop. People don't pay attention to that stuff. I knew nothing about the 4K crop. Not because I didn't study or research that. I just was researching so much, I forgot to research that. I think I had initially looked at the 4K crop on other cameras, but when I got to this camera, I think I was I was overwhelmed with researching stuff that I forgot. That was the only one thing I forgot to research about this camera before I bought it. If I would have found out it had a 4K crop, I might not have gotten it. But then they would have left me with the problem of, now do I go with the R6 or do I wait to save up money and go with the R5? And really that's what I was thinking about doing, was saving up to go with the R5, because everybody was saying that the R5 didn't have a 4K crop. But now that I've heard some people say that the R5 does have a 4K crop. Only in extreme conditions though. It doesn't have a massive 4K crop like the R did. But the R5 will not crop until there's certain you have to turn on a bunch of different settings to get it to start to crop in. And it's just a little bit of a crop, but it's not much. It's not enough for people to say something about, but it does crop. And so when I found out the R5 even has the slightest crop, I'm like, why? Like, why? I wish Canon made it where you were able to go into these cameras and lock in certain options. You know, like, hey, if even no matter what setting I cut on, I don't want a 4K crop. Because these cameras don't tell you when you turn on digital image stabilization, it's gonna crop in on that sensor, but it doesn't tell you that. So I think some cameras might. I don't know if my camera might tell me that. I think I saw it crops in when you do that, and then it crops in when you do something else. It's the in-body image stabilization and something else. I can't remember. But you know, so you just think about, a lot of these cameras are already like 24 megapixel or whatever, and then you crop in, and I think we're getting rid of even more megapixel. You know what I'm saying? So people don't think about that. They don't think about that. You take a camera like the R5, which is 45 megapixel, you have room to crop in. You see it, like they designed that camera for it to be able to, it's still, no matter what you do to, no matter what setting you put the camera on, it's going to give a nice image. You see what I'm saying? So that's one issue with the C70. C70 gives a super clean image. Oh my goodness, it's a beautiful image. I seen my teacher use it. But you just gotta think, if you crop in, or then also the C70, you can't take pictures with it. So even if I bought the C70, I would still have to buy another high-end camera. So that's what I'm saying. When Canon is making these cameras cost $5,000-$6,000, like, I'm not, it's something that I have to say, am I gonna sit back and wait to see if they're gonna come out with something better, or am I gonna settle for what they have? You know, and I don't feel like it's worth it. I'm not saying that Canon cameras are not worth it, but for what I'm trying to do and for the budget that I'm trying to remain on, I'm not willing to pay $6,000 for a camera that doesn't do everything, you know, everything that I needed to do. Now, I will pay $6,000, $6,000, $10,000 for a camera. Don't want to go to 10,000, but I'm saying if there was no other option for a camera that does everything in one. There is no camera, there is no Canon camera out there that can do everything in one. You see what I'm, and I really wouldn't want to go over like $5,000. Even if that camera did everything in one, I really wouldn't want to go over that amount. So if they release a camera that costs $10,000, you know, so that just leaves a question mark over my head. Like, that's why I have not bought another Canon camera yet. And I've already invested in a bunch of L series glass. So I'm not gonna sell my equipment, and I'm not gonna invest in Sony yet. But I have been thinking about that. I've been thinking about owning some Canon products and owning some Sony, because each has their strengths. But I really believe that Canon is eventually going to release that camera that I can be happy with. You see what I'm saying? And I know that if I start digging into Sony, I'm gonna spend as much money as I'm spending in Sony on Canon, even though Sony is a little bit cheaper. But what I'm saying is I'm gonna go into their G Master lenses. Like, I'm not gonna buy basic lenses. I'm not gonna buy basic cameras. You know, I'm gonna buy Hollywood grade stuff. So, and when I say Hollywood grade, I'm not saying like $30,000 cameras, something like that. I'm not at that level yet. I will be there. I'm not at that level yet. But what I'm saying is, you know, that $2,500 to, you know, $10,000 range. Well, maybe not 10,000, but that's at the extreme high end. You know, $2,500, $3,500, you know, on up to $5,000, $6,000, $7,000. You know, don't want to spend that much, but I know that that's what comes with the territory. The cheapest Netflix grade camera that you're gonna get from any maker, like Sony, for example, the FX3. What is that camera, like $3,500? You know, but like I say, the C70, which is what, $5,000, $6,000. The imaging that I seen from the C70 is everything that I've visualized in the camera. Okay, so for somebody out there that's serious, find out about that C70. Find out about the R5C. These are cinema grade cameras, right? And even if you're one step under, if you're not recording films, if you're not recording music videos, you drop one step down to something like the R5 or the R6 Mark II or the R6, you know, or even the R3, and you know, you're still doing a lot of things. Even the R8 is only $1,500. Y'all spend that on cell phones and, you know, TVs and stuff. So the R8 is definitely a game changer right now. The R8 is the R6 Mark II. That is exactly what it is on a budget. It's the same camera without IBIS and a few other things. Canon really just gave y'all a super thank you in that R8. Really did. It has a whole lot of modern features in it that are, you know, the R6 Mark II and the R8, from what somebody was telling me, there's these features that your cell phone can do, and these two cameras have that, or the first two cameras from Canon to have that type of technology in it. So I think he said it only works in auto mode, so it doesn't work in like the manual modes. He was saying something about when it does something with the exposure, like it'll stack like 3 or 4 images and give you the cleanest image out of those 3. It's basically like for a beginner that was using the R8, they could put it in auto and snap the picture, and even though they didn't have the exposure set right or whatever it was, it would basically automatically give them the best imaging, kind of like your phone does. So along with some other things he talked about, the thing that I like about the R8 and the R6 Mark II over the R and the RP versions, like I said, was the low light autofocus. That's one thing that I've noticed if I'm using my my camera in low light. Well, it doesn't even have to be low light. It could be super bright in the room. But if I have adjusted my ISO and my shutter speed and my aperture in a way that I can that the image is not as clear as it could be, it seems to have a problem with the autofocus. I've had people use the 50mm 1.8, which is a $200-300 lens, and they don't have problems with autofocus. Like, I seen somebody use the 50mm 1.8. This is the 1.2, but I seen them use the 1.8, and they were using an R6, and the autofocus just like never missed, almost never missed. With this camera, I seem to have problems with my autofocus here and there, and that's with the R. It's only when the lighting is not right. But like with the R6, the R6 Mark II, the R8, even if you don't have the lighting set right, like let's say you could not even see, you could almost barely see what you're looking at on the screen. The R6, the R6 Mark II, the R6 Mark II, I'm sorry, and the R8, they use a different, they don't use the lighting that we see on the screen to hunt for the autofocus. It uses its own lighting. It finds the best lighting. Like, even though you have the light set to where you're trying to get the image, it uses a whole different lighting to be able to hunt for that, to be able to see what it needs to see. So that autofocus is way more, it's way better, no matter what you have, what you see out of this screen, no matter what you see through the viewfinder, it is still going to grasp the best image that it can see. Now, I'm not saying if it's like completely dark. I'm saying, like right now, the sun is out. Let's say the sun has went down. There's still some light. Well, and you don't want to crank your ISO up to destroy the image. But what the autofocus is doing, the autofocus is running off a different system. It will crank up the ISO if it needs to be able to see, so that it can see whatever it needs to see. But you can still have your ISO, a clean ISO, or shutter speed, or whatever it is you need in your image. So it's using two different systems there from what I'm seeing, and I just love that. So that's one of the things that, you know, the next camera that I get, I want to make sure that it has that feature, as well as no 4K crop, and the Digic X. No longer gonna go with the Digic 8. Digic 8 was fine for its time, but Digic X is stepping more into, like, you got to think, a lot of cameras cannot compete with like some of the things that go on with phones. Cameras exceed and beat phones in a lot of ways, like quality and all that. But some of these features and technology that these phones have, the cameras are just not, they're not up to par yet with it. And that is what Canon has finally stepped into with the R6 Mark II and the R8. That's why I'm telling y'all, this R8, y'all should go get it. And the R6 Mark II, if you can afford it, if you want something with IBIS, in-body image stabilization, you should get that camera. Now me, I was thinking about buying the two cameras. I do want a camera with IBIS in it, so, but I know that if I buy a R6 or even an R6 Mark II, I'm still going to want to buy another camera. Plus, those cameras are not Netflix approved. So it's just kind of one of these things where you got to step back and wait and see what Canon is going to do. Still, my R has 30 megapixel. You know, I'm going to stay with that right now. Right now, what I'm going to do is I am going to invest in L series lenses. My next lens is a 28-70, and then I'm going to buy maybe 2 or 3 more L series lenses. Hopefully by that time, Canon will have released more cameras, and then I can buy me a camera. So until then,